Since our oldest son and his wife are coming home for the holidays, you should go back to your parents' house. I was stunned by these words from my husband of many years. I can't believe he wants me to go back to my parents' house now. I hadn't seen our son and his wife in a long time as well. This was all part of my husband Frank's plan. Seeing him smirk, I made up my mind. I will make him regret this. My name is Sarah Johnson, and I am a 73-year-old housewife. My husband Frank is 75 this year. We've been married for 40 years. We have only one son. Our son Michael is already an adult and a successful professional. He was born when I was 42, and Frank was overjoyed at his birth. Frank, being the second son, always felt he was treated differently from his older brother. I recall that my late in-laws always favored his older brother, neglecting us. So, it was natural for him to dot on Michael. Determined to raise him as the head of the Johnson family, he was enthusiastic about both sports and academics. Michael tried hard to meet his father's expectations. His over-involvement with Michael was so intense that it often worried me. When Michael left for college out of state, we were both proud and a bit sad. Frank insisted he'll definitely come back home, but I doubted it. He was finally free from all the restraints. Once he tasted freedom, he wouldn't return to us. As I predicted, Michael got a job and married a woman from his workplace out of state. His wife was a colleague from the same company. She was a local hire, and Michael told me he'd visited her parents many times. It seems he gets along well with her parents. He's got a straightforward dad. Michael told me. Though he never showed it in his words or demeanor, he must have been tired of Frank's over-involvement. When he introduced his girlfriend as a potential wife, Frank was not welcoming at all. He probably thought Michael would return if she wasn't in the picture. Initially, he was against the marriage, and Michael frequently called me saying, "Please try to persuade Dad." Though he resisted, he eventually approved, out of love for his son. If he was going to approve, he should have accepted it from the start. This was typical of Frank, who always had to complain first. Michael's wife, Lisa, is a wonderful person. Meeting during holidays, Frank eventually liked her and forgot he ever opposed their marriage. He even started visiting them without me. I once asked to join. But he refused. He didn't want them to talk to me more than him. Going alone, he got all their attention. My persistent requests led to him secretly spending a night there recently. I was shocked when Michael called me about it. I never imagined he would go behind my back. Frank still hasn't let go of his son. Michael and Lisa don't have kids yet. I sometimes worry about what will happen if they have a grandchild. If we clash with them over education or parenting, it would be disastrous. I need to distance Frank from them before they have kids. I resolved to do this. After we got married, I had one dream. I wanted to own a home. As a working couple, we should have been able to achieve this dream. But we never did. Even now, we live in a rented apartment. It's not a bad place, but I still wish we had our own home. We gave up on the dream due to financial issues. Since our marriage, I had been saving diligently for a house. Just when I thought we were ready, a shocking event occurred. One day, I updated our savings passbook for the house fund and was shocked out of my mind. The balance was only $12. The shock was so great, I still feel a chill remembering it. I never want to relive that moment. I wanted to rush to the police for help but called Frank first. He casually said, "I used it to pay off some debts." I was speechless except for what? I didn't even know he had debts. Even if I generously assume he had told me about the debts and I was aware of them. If he had just said, "I want to use the home savings to pay off the debts," I wouldn't have refused. What angered me was that he used the money as if it was solely his own without saying a word. How could you do this? Owning a home was our dream. Why did you act so selfishly? I asked, fueled by anger. He got defensive. Instead of apologizing, he yelled at me. I'm the head of this family. My word is law, and my actions set the direction for this household. Don't question me. I was stunned by his mindset. His personality had become warped, growing up overshadowed by his older brother. I regret not seeing this before we married. My dream of owning a home vanished. We remain in a rented apartment because I fear saving up only to have it spent again. His debts were due to gambling. He probably used the savings to clear all his debts. There were no more mentions of debts afterward. After the debt incident, he seemed to become more defiant. He constantly asserted his dominance at home, making it clear he was the most important and powerful. I had always respected him. Asking for more than that was unreasonable. Since retiring, he has had too much free time. That's why he started visiting Michael and Lisa. I worry that if he gets too bored, he might turn to gambling again. In that case, it might be better to let him visit them. However, I'm constantly concerned that he might be imposing them. Amidst these concerns, Frank said something unbelievable. Since Michael and Lisa are coming home for the holidays, you should go back to your parents' house. At the breakfast table, his words left me speechless. Seeing my reaction, he smirked and looked at me. What? Didn't you hear me? I said go back to your parents' house. To your hometown. What? Why do I have to go back to my parents' house just because they are visiting? My parents' house is an hour and a half away in the countryside. Both of them have passed away, and my sister and her husband are taking care of the house now. When he said he wanted to spend time alone with our son and his wife, I was dumbfounded. I was shocked to realize I wasn't considered part of the family. You haven't seen them much, right? If an annoying MIL is around, it'll be hard on Lisa, and Michael will be stuck between the two of you. Using such a selfish argument, he was trying to kick me out of the house. Maybe he was worried I might let slip about his gambling and debts. I thought it was incredibly selfish of him. Oh, and you don't need to come back. They might move in with me, so you'd be unnecessary anyway. That was the last straw for me. No matter how long we've been married, there's a line you don't cross. And he had just crossed it. All right, I'll go back to my parents' house. If they move in, I won't need my belongings here. I'll take care of them when I leave. I said this calmly and continued eating my soup as if nothing had happened. He responded with a hesitant, yeah, sure. Maybe he expected me to get angry or cry, but I'm not that kind of woman. Sorry to disappoint him. Better get started right away. I'll begin packing for my trip back home. Placing my bowl in the sink, I went to my room. Immediately, I contacted a certain company. I was determined to do this thoroughly. From the living room, I could hear Frank talking to someone on the phone. He was in a good mood, and it sounded like he was talking to Michael. Hearing him boastfully say, "You can come home anytime," annoyed me. He even said, "I've gotten rid of the nuisance." If that's how he wants to play, I won't hold back. I'm going to organize my things before I leave for my parents' house. The movers will be here soon, so don't be surprised. I called out from the living room entrance, and he replied dismissively, "Yeah." Right on time at 10 a.m., the movers arrived. "I'm taking everything I bought with my own money," I said. As I instructed the buyers and the junk removal crew, they started taking everything. Items that could be sold were sold, and the rest was handled by the junk removal team. The few belongings I had were entrusted to the moving company. Hey! What's going on? Seeing the workers arriving one after another, Frank was panicking. And he should be. Furniture and appliances were being carried out one after another. Even the Italian sofa he had been lounging on was quickly taken by the buyers. I was offered a good price for the items, and I agreed without hesitation. Even the recently bought TV was taken away. I believe the things I bought with my money belong to me, so I'm clearing everything out. His face changed color at my words. He finally realized what I was doing. But it was too late. The refrigerator, air conditioner, microwave, and dining table set. All bought with my earnings. Once everything was removed, there was hardly anything left in the house. I had always earned more than Frank when I was working. We can't live like this. I'll be embarrassed when they arrive. Put everything back. It was probably his last attempt to assert control. He ordered me around with a pale face, cold sweat dripping. I couldn't help but find it amusing. Don't be ridiculous. You're the one who told me to go back to my parents' house, right? I'm just taking care of my belongings before I leave. By the time I had seen off all the workers, the apartment was nearly empty. It felt like I had thrown away all our memories, but unexpectedly, I felt a sense of relief. Take care. I hope they are okay, living with you, I said, leaving him standing there in shock. I had informed my family, so my sister and her husband welcomed me warmly. They had placed my few belongings in my old room. I'll be staying for a while, I said. My sister, Emily, kindly said, you can stay as long as you want. I felt so relieved that all the tension left my body. I hadn't realized how stressed I had been. Over dinner, I told them everything that had happened. About Frank's debts and his worsening temperament over the years. When I mentioned he told me to leave because Michael and Lisa were visiting, Emily got angry on my behalf. Just seeing her anger lightened my heart. I think I want a divorce. It's a bit embarrassing at this age, but I finally voiced what I'd been thinking for a long time. There's nothing embarrassing about it. Late-life divorces are common. The sooner the better. Let's get you divorced quickly. She was more enthusiastic than I was. But she was right. There was no point in enduring any longer. I wanted to be free for the rest of my life. I needed to talk to Michael properly. With that in mind, I called Michael. Frank called him so often that I rarely did myself, feeling guilty about the frequent calls. Surprised by the rare call, he answered after the first ring. Mom, I heard you left from Dad, he said right off the bat. It seemed Frank had called him before I did. He apparently told Michael that I had left because I was upset about them coming home for the holidays, making it sound like I had left on my own whim. Michael said he sounded angry and self-righteous. He's twisting the story to suit himself again. I sighed. I then told him everything that had happened. I also shared the debt incident, which I had considered keeping to myself. This whole situation began with that debt issue. I worried that if I kept it hidden, Michael wouldn't understand my feelings. I see. Mom, you went through so much without me knowing. I'm sorry for not realizing. He apologized sincerely. Frank had badmouthed me every time he visited them. He told Lisa that he was tired of hearing from me every day that I didn't like her. He even made it seem like I was the one against their marriage. He had painted me as the evil Mil. No wonder Lisa didn't want to visit us. The reason they stayed away from home was because of his lies. Michael had never imagined his father would lie like that and had believed everything. He told me he had been prepared to confront me to protect his wife. Their holiday visit was meant to confront me. I told him I was considering divorce. There was a long silence, likely from the shock. Mom, I think you should do whatever you feel is best, he finally said softly. At that moment, tears began to pour uncontrollably. All the pent-up emotions came flooding out. Even over the phone, he noticed I was crying and his voice wavered with emotion. Mom, no matter how difficult he is, Dad is still my father. I wanted you both to get along, but I understand if that's not possible. I could only nod and say a yes, repeatedly. When Michael and Lisa came home for the holidays, I returned to the apartment once. The apartment had been cleaned and organized by them. New household appliances had also been provided. They must have taken care of this. How dare you show your face here? Frank yelled the moment he saw me. In the past, his shouts would have intimidated me. But today, I wasn't fazed by his loud voice. I glared back at him and handed him the divorce papers. Please fill this out. This will make our divorce official. I'll be leaving, I said. I had already completed my part. All that was left was for him to sign. He stared at the divorce papers for a moment. Hurry up and sign it so I can leave, I urged. Reluctantly, he began to sign. While he was writing, he glanced up at me several times. His servile attitude irritated me. Once he finished signing, I quickly snatched the divorce papers away. It would be troublesome if he tore them up in a fit of rage. After confirming the signature, I put the divorce papers in my bag. There's no property to split. Don't expect any money. I almost laughed. I know we have no assets, I replied. As long as you understand. I don't want you begging for money. He retorted, trying to maintain his pride. It was ridiculous to see him trying to act superior after creating debts through gambling. I decided to drop the final bombshell. Living here will be tough. The rent is $1,200 a month. You can't afford that on your pension. You didn't know. But I've been using my father's inheritance to pay it. He seemed to have forgotten about the rent. My father's inheritance could have built us a home, but he died after the debt incident. I didn't want to build a home using his money. I wanted a home built with the money we saved together. If you had that money, my debts wouldn't have been a problem. You could have helped me, but you held out on me. With that money, I wouldn't have had any debts. His outrageous outburst almost made me laugh. He had the nerve to say such things after everything he did. His debts were from gambling, so what was he implying? He sounded as if he believed he could have won if he'd gambled with my father's inheritance. Such a ridiculous notion. Stop talking nonsense. Your debts were from gambling. Even after using the home savings to pay off your debts, are there more? I felt uneasy and asked him. He suddenly became evasive. This confirmed that he still had debts. I suspected he was still gambling, but to think he had more debts was unbelievable. I needed to finalize the divorce quickly. I stood up and headed for the door. Michael and Lisa, who had been silently observing, followed me. As I put on my coat, they offered to handle things from there. I looked at Michael. He smiled slightly, but his eyes were serious. Unfortunately, it can't be helped. I plan to put Dad in a care facility soon. It will keep him away from gambling, and he can make friends there. He said as I was leaving. He also mentioned that they would be moving out of the apartment soon. I was surprised because I thought they were going to live with him. This turn of events was completely unexpected, and I couldn't help but voice my surprise. I thought you were going to start living with him, I said. He replied firmly. What? No way. Lisa is uncomfortable around him too. I finally escaped his overbearing nature. There's no way we can live with him now. He smiled wryly as he spoke. He was right. If I were Michael, I wouldn't want to live with such a father as well. Especially after experiencing freedom, it would be impossible. In the end, Frank would be abandoned by his own son. Loving your child and being overbearing are two different things. This situation is the result of him not realizing that difference. I wondered what kind of face he would make when he found out he was being put in a facility. I felt a bit sorry for him, but he brought this on himself. Afterward, I submitted the divorce papers, and Frank and I were officially divorced. With no assets to divide, there was nothing to argue about. The day after the divorce was finalized, debt collectors came to the apartment. Michael and Lisa were still there and managed to handle the situation. Michael convinced Frank to move out as soon as possible and start fresh somewhere new. He arranged for Frank to move into a beautiful senior care facility by the sea, a bit far away. I hoped he would live out his remaining years quietly there. Initially, Frank resisted going, but Lisa persuaded him to go. Maybe she still held a grudge over the opposition to their marriage. I was worried about the cost since Michael had placed Frank in a rather expensive facility. He reassured me, don't worry about the money. It's better to have him in a good, distant facility than a cheaper one nearby. This way, there will be fewer problems. Listening to him, I understood. If Frank were in a regular facility nearby, he'd constantly complain and call for help. By placing him in a top-notch, distant facility, any issues would be handled by the staff, reducing the need for frequent visits. Michael had thought this through. Not being able to see his beloved son would be the hardest blow for Frank. Perhaps this would make him reflect on his actions. I, too, had been unable to see them because of him. Now he would understand that pain. This is what people mean by reaping what you sow. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' house and started living with my sister and her husband. I had planned to find a small apartment and move out soon, but they insisted I stay. They had no children. Their large country home felt empty with just the two of them. My sister's husband is a very gentle and kind person. He treats me like his own sister. I took over all the household chores for them, who work in agriculture. I suddenly found a new sense of purpose in doing housework. It had been a long time since anyone had appreciated my efforts. With this new discovery, I embarked on a new chapter in my life.